it's a good idea just to size it in sections so that you've got a base really, so you don't lose control as you're going on and take away a little bit too much. It's not quite thick enough, but never mind. I'm going to use calipers. I'm going to start sizing in on this far end. I will mention there's a couple of other ways of, instead of calipers, you could use something like this for stool legs, because the measurement at this end needs to be absolutely spot on, because it's going to go into the stool base and you don't want a wobbly leg. So you're going to take extra care over this end. Now calipers, we all use calipers. I use calipers all the time and I'm going to use them tonight. But they do bend ever so slightly outwards if you're not careful. If you're heavy-handed, which I am, and push too hard against the wood, they can bend outwards ever so slightly. These calipers are pretty solid. They've got a nice lock on them. So these are the ones that I always use at this end for making my chucks and for taking the most important measurements, because they're not so likely to move outwards. So we're just going to size this end in with the parting tool. Perfectly acceptable to do it with one hand, like so, and wait till it drops. But you do need to be very, very careful, because like I say, this measurement, this is the one that needs to fit into the base of the chair. So I'm going to take that down a little bit at a time. This is probably spinning way too slowly. There we go. That's a little bit better. Now, as it gets near, I'm going to stop before it drops down, before it gets to the perfect length, because, well, A, I'm going to blend the shape in, and B, we can always come back to it later, and C, we might even lose a little fraction when we're sanding. So we'll leave it there, and we'll move on to the other end. Before I do, and before I forget, as well as sizing in with calipers, with a parting tool, a production turner might use something like this, because they're doing a lot of them. They're going to size in the same time over and over and over. So to get your width, might use something like this, probably ideally one that doesn't move, get one the right size, and they sharpen up the top tooth and use that as a parting tool and a caliper at the same time. Nice and fast. And I imagine the chair legs then over the shoulder into a pile of sawdust on the floor, ready to be put together, you know, at the end of the day. I'm going to size in the bottom as well. The bottom is, like I said, that's going to be the waste wood. Basically, there's a point sticking in there, and I don't want a little pointed indent on the foot of the stool. So we're going to take it to there. That'll do. Now, what I will do is I just want to make that distance the same width as my parting tool. I'm struggling to cut with for some reason. There we go. The reason I'm making it the same width as my parting tool, you see like that, is because that's a measurement that won't change. It's all well and good using rulers, templates, and remembering what measurement is what. But I think if you can use a tool and say, well, okay, I'm going to use that to measure it each time. It's always going to be the same. It's always going to be at hand. I use the same roughly on that side and roughly for the beads as well. It's just a handy guide. It's like looking at the chuck or looking at there to get the width. It's handy to use something solid for that. Now, I'm going to start shaping this. Before I shape it, I'm just going to mark where the beads are. Actually, sorry, I'm not. I'm going to sizing ever so slightly more on the bottom, because the bottom foot part of the leg is going to be more narrow than the top. I've got 4 sets of calipers, and luckily for me, they're all different sizes. So if I'm using 4 sets on something like this, because I want 4 different measurements, so this is for the top part. The second one is the thickness there and the thickness there, which is the thickest part of the leg. And the third set is for your bottom part here. So I'm still getting to that. It's going to be about that width. And the 4th set will be for the very tip of the toe when we get down to that point. Great to use different sizes, because then you can lay them out starting that side and working that way. And if you always do it that way, even if you muddle your calipers up, drop them on the floor, you're not going to grab the wrong one. I used to just put them on a table next to me and find that, yeah, I was quite often muddling them up. You haven't got different sizes, just label them, number them, colour code them, something like that. So that's about the width of the foot. This bead here wants to be roughly the same diameter as the foot, so we'll size in there, but we want to be careful not to lose the edge of that bead. Now I remember it was the width of this parting tool, so I'm going to take it to there. And before I forget about the bead, I'm going to mark it. I'm going to mark it using this tool. I'm not sure what you'd call this tool. It's a 3-sided pointed point tool. Basically a sharpened up chisel shaft, I think, or gouge shaft or something. But it's very useful. It's useful for marking, and it's useful for tidying up beads. I'm going to come back to it in a little bit when I do the beads, so we'll come back to that. We'll mark these top beads again. Before we start shaping, I'm going to push straight in with that tool, being careful not to go one side or the other, because it's very easy to go off course with this one. So I've marked 3 beads there, quite large beads. Large beads are easy to roll, and they stand out more on the design. Now I'm going to shape the leg now.
There are some old chisels at the back for free. You can grind your own point so the back doesn't worn down.
Which is a great use for old chisels. So to shape him, to get some kind of shape here, we'll just start on this side, around there like that. I'm going to just tidy this side up with a spindle, gouge. Probably not quite got it, but, and then I'll move to a roughing gouge to get the shape. Roughing gouge just clears the wood a little bit quicker, but it also leaves quite a nice curve, to be fair. This, when I was starting to learn wood turning, the roughing gouge was one of my favourite tools. I felt quite comfortable using it. I felt quite safe using it. Didn't feel like I was going to catch the wood as much as I would with a spindle gouge. And you can actually use it for quite a lot, even some of the things that you might consider a little bit too delicate. Well, that's looking something like the shape. I struggle personally with my eyesight. I wear glasses, I wear contact lenses, but I also have something called stigmatisms in my eyes. So I can't see very well no matter what I wear. Artificial light's terrible. Wood on wood is terrible. I'm not complaining. My workshop has also got a wooden floor, so I'm used to it. What I do find is if I'm making something like this where I want to see the fine details, I'll actually chuck a black mat or something down on the floor, because then when you look down, the wood against the black mat, you get perfect silhouettes. So just as I've tidied this end up here, I've blended into the end there. So I just need to check again that I've not taken it too far. They're still not dropping, so that's pretty good. I'll probably take a little bit more off, and then I'll just take the last bit off right at the end. We're gonna, I'll quickly shape this middle bit. What tool's best there? That's where I've put it. Again, I use a tool rest like that at home. Put it in front of the lathe just for some extra holes. I've got a chunk of wood glued to the side of my lathe with a few holes as well, just for the tools that I'm using. Try not to use too many. However many I've got tonight, 7, 8 maybe. That's pretty much the same ones I use for everything. I think the only tool I haven't brought with me tonight that I use fairly regularly is a scraper, a round-headed scraper, because I've got no use for one of those. I quite like to use a variety of tools. That's what I bought them all for. But there's absolutely no reason that you couldn't tackle something like this just with a skew chisel. This is a perfect job for a skew chisel. If you wanted to practice your skew chisel work, well, certainly where the legs are concerned, you can do the whole operation very efficiently with a skew chisel. But this isn't a lesson in skew chisel work, so and I'm not the best person to give that. Probably shaped that just ever so slightly too much, but it doesn't really matter. This is the section of this, pretty familiar to break things into 3 when you're wood turning. 3s work nicely, so a leg broken into 3 parts works nicely. Just before I go any further at the end, check that I haven't, that's all right, that's pretty good. So there we go, we'll shape that. The reason I've shaped the sections before the beads is because if I was to do the beads first and then shape those, there's a good chance I might knock into the beads, and I don't want to. It's much easier to do the beads at the end. And besides, they're standing up now. It's obvious where they are. I'm just going to round off the bottom there, because this is the foot of the stool. And I'm not moving my tool rest, and I should be. The only reason I'm not is because I've made quite a few stools recently, and I'm very used to where the edge of the tool rest is. This is exactly the same length as mine. Really, you should move your tool rest as often as you can to keep your chisel near the middle of your tool rest for support. Like I said, I'm not here to teach you how to do it correctly. I'm just showing you how I do it. I'm going to do these beads now quickly. Oh, sorry, quick. The base of the foot, I've rounded the base of the foot because of the purpose of the stool, sorry. This is quite a decorative stool. It's more than likely going to stand on a carpet rather than a hard floor. And it's going to be sat on rather than stood on. So, yeah, I can't see very well there. Because I can't see very well, it's a handy time to use the pointed tool again, because that just gets right into the edge of your beads without worrying about catching the bead with your wing. I use that a lot when I'm doing beads. Sometimes I even just use that and a parting tool to do the beads. Yep, that's cheating. But I don't believe there is cheating. It's just a case of getting the job done. As long as you're doing things safely and as long as you're getting the results that you want, it's okay to experiment a little bit sometimes. As I finish off rolling these beads like this, I will mention you can get beading tools. A beading tool would be a good idea to use, really, because you would get the same beads each time. A beading tool looks something like this. I'm not sure how best to show you, but basically it's chisel and it's been sharpened with a little curve in there. So when you put that onto, like a parting tool, when you put that onto your wood, it'll create a bead. But it's pretty ruthless at creating beads. It can tear out the wood quite easily. So it wouldn't be my first choice. Even though it's quick, easy, and you will get perfect beads size-wise every time. So here we go again. I'll just use this to get into the bottom of the beads there. I can't see it perfectly myself, but I'm guessing that's something like right. That looks fairly good, really, for the first leg. I'll give it a little bit of a quick sand. I don't want to sand too much because there's a lot of people here and we don't want sawdust everywhere. There's a lot of tool marks on there. That's really not very good demonstration of tool control at all. You'd be, while you're practicing these, it's a really good time to practice your tool control. Like I say, make sure the bevel of that gouge is rubbing behind you. And then you shouldn't need all this sanding. At this point, you could put a finish on the legs. You could put some oil on, which would probably be my preferred finish for a stool. You could use something like Yorkshire grit, or True Grit, did he say it was called now? That's a bad example of beads. That bottom bead isn't great. Now, I will go back and just see if I can do something with it, because these things play in your mind. Someone's got to look at this stool. There's not much you can do to adjust a bead, but I'll just try and tidy it up ever so slightly, just make it a little bit smaller. That one there. I think it was that one that's upsetting me. None of them matter too much. If you were going to put oil on your stool legs at this stage, you need to cover that tip and to wrap some tape around it. We don't need to, but it's a good idea to cover that tip and wrap some tape around it, because you don't really want oil where you're going to glue the joint. I usually leave finishing a project like this right till the last minute. I'll oil it, wax it, whatever I'm going to do by hand off the lathe, which is why this one's still unfinished, even though the legs could have been finished now. I need to leave the top unfinished because I want to pyrograph onto it. Don't have to pyrograph, you can paint or anything, but we'll come back to that. When you're doing, when you're sanding your beads, Not so easy on big ones, but they're not usually that big. You can finish off the shape with a piece of sandpaper. If you just push your sandpaper to a kind of a square there and hold it over the bead, after a few seconds, it starts to create a sandpaper beading tool, essentially. So you can use that nice little curve to do your beads. There we go. But that's enough sanding. We don't want to be sanding away too much. I'm going to check this end again now, because now's the time to get that right. What is a good idea? Well, what's a great idea is to make the top of the stool first. But you can also use a chunk of wood as a template. This one's been used many a time as a stool template and got a few notes written on it, which again is worth doing, worth making templates, keeping them, writing notes on them. You're going to use this template basically to check whether your legs fit into the hole. I don't think this one's actually got a hole the same size as the legs that I'm doing, so I won't be able to use that. But thankfully, I've brought a seat top with me. It's done. So I can check legs like that. Now, if your seat top was done already, you'd have a seat top with some holes drilled in the bottom to check your legs. I'm going to take this off to check it. It's not right because they aren't dropping yet. Just double check that these calipers are still right and haven't moved. Yeah, they're pretty much. There we go. Nearly. Nearly. And that's the point where I think it just needs one more cut. And I've made that mistake over and over and over. It won't need one more cut. It might do to fit, but there's other ways of doing it. You can sand quite often, especially with shaping things. Quite often you'll get the perfect shape, you'll get a lovely looking profile. You'll think, I'll just take that one more cut to elevate it to greatness, and you ruin it. Every time you will ruin it. Okay, so that doesn't quite fit. Thankfully, we've still got the points on here, so we can put it back on the lathe and just finish it off either by sanding or take a shave more off. Whoa, now you see that's completely, I've got to put that back on. Try and line it up properly.
What kind of wood is the stool?
This is made out of beech. Beech is really nice for making stools. I do like beech. The reason I've chosen beech is because I want to decorate it. And beech is great for pyrographing onto. It's got a nice tight grain, so the pyrography goes on well. If you've got a wide grain like ash or oak, pyrography tends to bleed into the grain and burn it quite badly. I make stools a lot from oak. I like oak. Oak's quite forgiving. It sands well. Easy to hide any tool marks that you might have. But yeah, for this purpose, I'm more than happy with beech. And obviously it'll change colour quite a lot as well, will beech, when you put some polish on. It's very light at the moment. So hopefully that's going to fit. That will go in. It's very tight, so a quick sand to make it perfect, just because I've got time. I didn't think I would have much time. But
You say you'd make the top first.
in an ideal world, I would. To be honest, usually I make the legs first because I make so many of them, and then I'll make the tops afterwards. it's a really good idea if you have got the time and the wood to make more than one stool at a time. If you make 2, 3, or 4 stools as a set, you're going to end up with 12, 16 legs. So amongst all those legs, if there's a slight variation in size, if your beads are a few millimeters out, there's a very good chance you'll be able to match them up 4 or 2 or whatever that looks similar. So it's a great idea to make more than one stool. For that reason, I often do make the legs first, and I would have a template at home. I've brought the wrong one because it's a better demonstration. I've got a small template at home with 2 holes drilled in it, which are the 2 leg sizes that I use all the time. So that's what I use. But yeah, doesn't matter which way around you do it. As far as the procedure goes, it doesn't matter at all. That was really, really close. So I'm just going to sand that to a finish. I'm not going to use the chisel on that. I'm also not going to finish sanding it to a fine finish because I don't want sawdust everywhere. I can finish it later as long as I leave the chucking point on. And I've got a spare. So hopefully that will fit now into the stool. So we've got one leg. We can check that against our other ones, but I haven't got any other ones with the notches, with the notch still on. You've got that little notch of waste wood that can be removed. It could be removed now, but I'm going to remove those. I'd remove those all at the very last moment, just in case I need to put it back on and make any adjustments for any reason whatsoever. Now, I'm going to set up for the next part, which is drilling the seats. Well, not drilling the seat, but making the seats. I'm not going to turn. I'm looking at the time and thinking whether I could make another leg. I probably could make another leg in 20 minutes, but you've seen one leg. I'm going to make it exactly the same way, and I'm going to tell you exactly the same stuff. So I've brought some other legs with me so that I can move on to the seats and actually get the job finished. But assuming I had made 4 legs, then you do want to check that everything looks okay. And at this point, I might be about to show myself up because I don't think these are perfect. We'll put 4 legs down. These I've taken the notches off the bottom. Best way to check height is to pop your ruler on top. They're not far off. 2 of them are longer than the other 2. So we know we're going to have to remedy that one way or another when we load them into the stool. That's nearly always going to be the case, or it certainly is when I make stool legs. A millimetre here and there, it's so easy to lose. You can imagine if I had 12 or 16, there's a good chance that same pattern would go all the way down. So you shift them round, match them up, put them together, so you've got something that matches. But I know I can sort this out in 2 ways. I can take a little bit off the foot, or we can take a little bit off the top. When I say take a little bit off the top, I wouldn't actually take a little bit off the top. I'd just drill one of these holes a little bit deeper. Drill 1 hole a little bit deeper. Off this case, drill 2 holes a little bit deeper. Make sure you put them in the right one. Chances are you're going to get there. You might not get there, and if you don't get there, there's still another way to tidy up afterwards. Now, all I'm going to do now is set up to turn the stool top. I'm going to do that, probably do that after the break, but I might make a start. I've got in my mind that I want to decorate the stool, but obviously there's no way I've got time to decorate the stool. Something like this. This is a very simple image. It wouldn't take long to pyrograph, but even so, you're looking at probably an hour or so of pyrography and then some colouring. Nobody wants to watch me pyrograph anything for that long, or at least not this many. When it comes to your seat of your stool, Let's move all these calipers out of the way. When it comes to the seat of the stool, it's about picking the right blank to start with. It's best to start with a blank that's a little bit thicker, just because it gives you more options. This one is too thin. That's just about be right for a stool seat when it was finished. But you need to hold this somehow on the lathe. It's always the same problem. You've got to find a way of holding things on the lathe. You could very easily just drill with a Forstner bit straight in. Beech drills quite well, so you could drill. You've got a point to hold that onto a chuck in an expansion fashion. That's perfectly good, except you can't then turn it around. You've got no way of holding it from the other direction. So that would have to remain the bottom of the stool. And you wouldn't have a chance to do any turning on that. So you could still sand it down. It's the bottom. It's pretty flat. So you could work with it if you really wanted to. I'd say that's a little bit lazy. We won't do that. Well, it's a good way to hold it though as well, to get started. To put a chucking point on, the ideal way I think to hold a piece of wood this sort of size is on a spigot. So that's how we're going to turn the stool top, is by holding it on a spigot. Reason being, that's a nice strong grip for something like that. Again, nothing wrong with expansion, especially when using a disc and it's going to stay in a disc. If you're turning a bowl, expansion on the base, it can cause problems because as you get near the base, there's not much wood to expand into. So there's quite a lot of tension being put on a small amount of wood. But all that wood's going to stay in place. So expanding your chuck into that is not going to cause any problems. It's not going to damage your wood at all. You can, you could hold a blank like this between centres to get started, which is what I did to put this chucking point on. I've just started it with a chucking point because it's safer than starting it between centres, that's all. But for the sake of this demonstration, that's not going to be the bottom. That's not our holding point. That's just to get me started. I'm going to hold it on there. This is the bottom of the stool. I'm going to create a spigot on there, a better size one as well. That was a very rough spigot just to hold the blank. Now, it's extremely safe, so we can leave it at that. We don't really need the tailstock at that point. Before I move on to demonstrating the seat, I will just mention templates because I think I've flown through my talk about templates a little bit quicker than I wanted to. When I mentioned the templates at the beginning, and I talked about drawing something like this on wood, I think this is a really good way to start any project. Before you even do a project, you're probably looking at a couple of blanks and thinking, what can I make out of those? So I found that really, one of the things that makes trophies, a lot of trophies, which look something like that. But I think to start with, what I've actually started doing to make sure I can actually create what I want to create is drawing the size of the blanks that I've got and stacking them up and thinking that's how I'm going to make something. I know then that it'll fit. I can start drawing it out and create a template now while I can see it, you know, in real terms. when you're turning something on the lathe, it doesn't always look the same horizontally as vertically. It certainly doesn't look the same ever as it does as a finished project. But if you've got a template to start with, you've got something to stick to. You can have it as simple like those. That's fairly simple. Or you could have a much more detailed template with measurements, proper measurements all the way down, because that would have been repeated over and over. So it needed to be perfect. So I think templates are a really good way to start any project. One of the key things to making stools, just wanted to mention that you can certainly use them for lots of other projects, even if it's not a repetitive task that you're doing. Now we're getting near break time, but I'll just put a chucking point on the bottom of here so that we're set up for the next part. The next part's going to simply be make the seat. We're going to make the seat. We've got to drill holes for the legs, and then move on to the decorating at the end if there's any time. But I'll at least talk a little bit about how I decorate them. Oh. Haven't got that quite as straight as I wanted. Like I said, it doesn't really matter because this is actually going to be the base. Nice new chuck. What I didn't do, I will do it properly. I know it's all about measurements, and it's good to know the measurements of your expansion and contraction of the chuck, but I find it hard to remember measurements. And really, that's the measurements. Oh, that's quite, that's a bit loose, is that one? Should check the chuck jaw really before I started work on it. One of those jaws is a little bit loose. I'm not sure if I've got the right. This is the one. Yeah. Got you. There we go. Just tighten it up. Your chuck jaws, they do come loose over time. Well, mine certainly do. It's worth checking them every now and then. They're worth checking them every time you use them, really, but I don't think any of us are quite that efficient. So there we go. So I'll put a spigot on. I like a spigot on a stool because you can take it off at the end and leave your stool with just a flat base. If you use a recess, you will have to fill that somehow. I know a lot of people put a little disc into a recess with the name on. It's a fairly good idea. I use recesses. I'll leave a recess sometimes on a stool, and I'll pyrograph my logo into the recess. I'll put a couple of little beads on either side, so just to decorate the recess ever so slightly. But yeah, for this sake, I do prefer a spigot in an ideal world because you can remove it at the end. Removing it obviously is a challenge in itself, and we'll talk about that when we get to that point. As with everything, there's different ways. When I'm going to create a spigot here, that's going to be the end of it. I might actually just mark the end. I'll mark it with this. This is the parting tool that's been sharpened on an angle. So as I go in, it's just going in on the point rather than the whole of the face at the same time. It's also useful for cutting dovetail shape with your onto your spigot. I don't really use that for anything else other than spigots. It's just an old chisel that's been sharpened up. Now, as I'm going along now, usually I just take my chisel backwards first, just so I get an idea of how rough the wood is. And then I am going to go from the edge inwards. The reason I'm going inwards is because I don't want any tear out on the edge. You can go both ways. You can use a pushing cut or a pulling cut. Try not to send shavings flying too far. A pulling cut like that goes towards you. Perfectly okay. I am using a ball gouge, but I've actually picked up the wrong one. This is the one I use a lot. I'm quite familiar with it. But for something like this, a standard ball gouge with a standard sort of, I don't know, 45 grind, something like that would be ideal. Again, grinds, I think, is a personal choice. I wouldn't say there's good grind, well, of course there's good grinds and bad grinds, but if something works for you, or more importantly, if it works for the task that you need it to, then that's fair enough. And it's very handy to have some old chisels to grind up with unusual angles, just for the odd occasion that you do need them. Now the bottom of this, it wants to be as flat as possible because it's the base of the stool. And we're not going to come back to this. Once this is turned around, it's going to be finished and the tucking point is going to be taken off the inside. So we're going to make sure that this is flat. And I'm pretty sure it isn't because as is often the way when you're turning, I tend to go in towards the middle. Good way to check. A metal rule. As you can see, the middle there is a lot deeper than the outside, so I just need to take a little bit more off the outside. But just have to use a ball gouge for this. I know there's a break coming up, so I'll stop in a moment. You don't have to use a ball gouge, you could use a scraper. Oh, sorry, I forgot I had a microphone on that. Scraper's a good tool. Scraper's used in the trailing motion. That's probably trailing just a little bit too much. I don't think there's any shame in using a scraper. Some people might say otherwise. It can be quite a brutal tool. Obviously, you're not cutting the wood. You are just scraping it away. Whoops. But used properly, it can actually do some quite delicate work. You can create some nice shavings, especially if you use a negative rate scraper, which this isn't. But just to demonstrate, you can get a nice flat surface with the scraper, and because of the width, it's a little bit easier to tell as you're moving along whether you've curved the wood or not. So there we go. Always interesting to listen to the sounds while you're turning. Sounds are usually a warning of something or another. that wasn't much. That was just the scraper being pushed a little bit too hard. But yeah, always listen to your sounds, especially on a piece of wood like this, actually, as you get in, when you're turning a blank like this, you'll find quite often you can get cracks. You can get little cracks here, which you'll need to deal with, or glue up maybe before it breaks. Or I certainly do on some of my blanks. You will hear a little sound as you're turning with a ball gouge. You'll hear a little ticking sound. That's the catch. That's a little bit that's coming up. So you think, I need to stop there, put some glue in. Thankfully, no glue is necessary on this. If there was any cracks, I certainly wouldn't waste, unless it was a dangerous crack. Any little ones, I'd put some super glue in, put it aside and let it dry, and then continue later. Certainly wouldn't put super glue on anything here with people in front of me and then start spinning it, because you get super glue all over. I've had super glue all over me many a time. I've glued my fingers together many a time as well. But super glue is also a woodturner's friend. It's great for filling things. And obviously for a stool, even if the legs are going to fit perfectly, we still need a little bit of glue just to be sure. I'm going to leave it at that for now. That is fairly flat. It's the underside of the stool, so it doesn't matter too much, but like I say, it is going to be finished. We are going to use this surface at the end as the underside of the stool. So I think it's about break time, 8:30. So we'll take 15 minutes and then we'll come back. I'll continue finishing the seats. We'll put some legs in. You can see how the stool actually looks. And I'll talk a little bit about the pyrography and how I decorate them afterwards. I won't go into too much detail about pyrography. That is a whole demonstration in itself, is pyrography and colouring. So if we can get a finished stool or something like, I'll be really happy. If anyone wants to have a little look at the stools and bits and pieces during the break, you're more than welcome. But I'll be quiet for 15 minutes and let you entertain yourselves. Thank you. Cheers, thank you. Yeah, I'll go for it. I think I can do that on that thing. Okay, it looks like everybody's back from the breaks, which is great. Thank you. Now I'm gonna finish off the stool. Hopefully, I'm going to finish off the stool in the second half, and just have a little bit of a talk at the end about decorating it and about stools generally. But we'll get the last little bit of wood turning out of the way with. Okay, so I've put this back on. I'm going to admit my mistake straight away before somebody spots it. And this is the chucking point that I've just taken all that time making, and it's too small. So I'm going to go back and just use the other one just for safety. It's biting, it's enough. If I was at home, I'd work on it and hope it didn't fly off. But I do not want it. I don't want anything to come flying off in front of anybody. No, in the line of fire. So because I'm using the old chucking point, it's a bit wobbly. But we're going to get going. This is the top of the stool. Or for argument's sake, now it's become the top of the stool. So I want a nice flat surface. I'm going to lose that spigot, so there's no going back now. The top of the stool, I want a nice flat surface, but that's just my choice, and because I want to decorate it. You might prefer to dip your surface in slightly. You might actually prefer not to turn the top of the stool and to carve out like a bum print in the stool, which you could do with various carving devices, sanding. I think I once saw somebody at the demo day in the Keithley, shaping things by hand, shaping seats. And he was doing a very nice job of it in a traditional manner. So just to check at this point how we're looking, as usual, I've dipped in more in the middle than at the edge. So we'll just try and get it flat by taking the edge away. This is what I mentioned earlier about things not looking the same on the lathe whilst you're working. That looks flat to me, but I'm guessing it's because of the angle that I'm at. One problem with using beech is it does create quite a lot of dust, which is probably me a touch now. So, take a nice, very fine cut, which hopefully will suffice for us. I don't want to spend too much time. I don't want to spend too much time on the actual turn. This isn't really a lesson in how to turn. This is more a lesson in how to make a stool. And hopefully a few tips along the way. Now, with a bit of luck, that should be looking a bit more flat. Oh yeah, that's looking much better. And we'll go to just using the scraper again to finish off, because I don't know where I put the scraper. Oh yeah, thanks. I couldn't remember what colour the handle was there. I usually tend to remember all my chisels by the handles because they're familiar, which makes it difficult when you buy a new chisel and forget what you're looking for. The scraper is definitely not the best tool to be using at this point. It doesn't leave the nicest finish. It will require some sanding, but I'm using it so that I get a flat surface. And again, that's nearly flat. It's dipping in a little bit in the middle. This is just an example, so I'm going to move on and do the do the edges. Move the rest a little bit higher because we've moved out to the edge. Obviously, you'll find as you're working from inside to outside, you'll need to move your rest higher to the outside and the inside. So ball gouge, we'll just go straight and tidy up that first, just to stop it, just to get it straight, knocking a little bit. I just want to round off these edges a little bit. And to round them off, I'm just going to mark the center. Because I couldn't use the nice spigot and flat bit, this side's knocking a little bit, so it doesn't look anywhere near as nice as I'd like it. But I've marked the center of that because as you start turning the curve, you'll forget where the center was. Ideally, you should use the same number of passes on each side. That's number 4. And you should get the same curve. A lot of things, anything you're copying, or if you want to do something the same, make sure you do the same number of actions each time. I'll go to the other side. I'm being really careful when I get to the edge because as you can see on the edge of this, you're getting some tear out. It can't really be helped. You will get some tear out where it's meeting the end grain. So we've just got to be careful. If it was a flat, you could go the other way. But as it's going uphill, I'm really not going to go the other way. It's interesting just to think about why wood tears out, because it does it a lot. And often you see, if you follow any online forums, people are always showing pictures of why does this look like that? How do I get, why am I getting the tear out? But you get tear out because, because of the wood grain. As you're moving your chisel along a piece of wood, you're actually building up quite a lot of tension in the fibers of the wood. The fibers of the wood are a bit like a brush. So as you can imagine, as you're moving your chisel along a surface like this, all the tension is in the bristles behind the brush. Now, when you get to the end there, it's not going to come off smoothly. The brush is going to break away like that. It's going to come off bit by bit by bit. And that's what the fibers of the wood will do, because there's that much tension pushing against it, they'll break away. So when your fibers are coming up like that, it's only on the end grain, but that's why, and it's worth just thinking about it and being extra careful to get rid of them. I mean, that curve's okay. It's not perfect. To me now, this looks like the curve isn't ideal, but because it's as it is, you'd have to measure it. It is a good idea to measure that face and the other face once it's off to make sure that you have got the same on both sides. Because like I say, whilst it's there, it's hard to see. A good thing to do, it doesn't really matter with this, but if you're making a bowl or a vase or something like that, before you take it off the chuck and do anything else with it. I think it's a good idea to turn it round and look at it from that angle, because that's how you're going to be looking at it when it's finished. That's how I'm going to see the stool. And actually, when I look at that now, that curve doesn't look too bad. It looked worse than that on the lathe. But you'll find if you're looking at a vase or something else, suddenly it's upright, you'll have the right dimensions, but at the same time, you can put it back onto the lathe and continue working without worrying about it not running true again. This is the sanding point, which I'm not going to do because we've got enough dust and what have you. So really, that's your seat top. The seat top is some of the simplest turning you can do. It's a good way to practice faceplate turning. Not the same as ball turning. You're practicing something else. You're practicing making flat surfaces. This can be used for all kinds of different projects. I make a lot of trophies that are like plaques, like big discs, so they need a flat surface to pyrograph on. But obviously, chopping boards, pedestal stools, anything like that, you need a flat surface. So well worth practicing the skills that it takes, and remembering a ruler against it is a good way to check that you've actually got a flat surface. I'll take that one off. And this is where I pull my Blue Peter stunt and say, here's what I've made earlier. And I did make it earlier. I made it this afternoon, so I don't consider that cheating. It's all part of the same demonstration. But that's how it should look. Very much like this. It's flat. The surfaces are curved. I've sanded it around. But now we've got to the point where we need to drill some holes for the legs. This is a key point, really important, because the legs, they all need to splay out. For a start, they all need to splay out at the same angle. We're making a four-legged stool, not a three-legged stool. I would advise you to make a three-legged stool to start with, probably, because a three-legged stool doesn't matter so much if the legs are not even. It'll still stand upright. More so, it'll stand upright on an uneven surface, which is why they used to use three-legged stools as milking stools, because it'll just stand on a rough barn floor. As long as you sort of shuffle around, the stool will work perfectly well. So yeah, start with a three-legged stool maybe. Problem with a three-legged stool is just the way it looks, really, because when you look at a three-legged stool, if you put two legs like this and one leg at the back, it'll look like there's an overhang. If you turn it that way, the legs won't match up. You can't get a nice angle for a photo. And I want a photo of my stools, so I'm not going to make a three-legged stool for that reason. I'm going to make a Windsor stool. Probably is worth mentioning that although I call this stool a Windsor stool, I think I said earlier, a lot of people would call it a Bodger's stool, but it's not technically a Windsor design. The legs look like a Windsor chair, which is why I've called it a Windsor stool. But a Windsor chair basically is a chair where the back does not run all the way through. It's a stool that has then got the back turned and put on top of it. So without a back, it's not Windsor, I think. Welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm giving you knowledge that I've picked up somewhere and pulling out of the back of my mind. But that's what a Windsor chair is. It's a chair where the back doesn't run all the way up. And it's a great project for woodturners, Windsor chair. I think you can buy the base. You certainly used to buy them from Sneinton down the road. But I'm sure you can buy the seats and you make all the spindles and spacers. But to the important bit. So I'm going to use a drill press to cut this the stool. You could do it freehand, which I would not recommend. You could use a jig. Which is something like this, which I haven't tried myself yet, but I'm guessing would do the job fairly well. I certainly wouldn't risk it freehand, and a pillar drill like this for a beginner wood turner is a great device to have in your workshop. So we've decided over time that the accepted degree of angle is about 10 degrees. You might find for the purpose of the chairs, sometimes you want it a little bit less. If I was making a step-up stool, maybe a double step stool, I'd probably keep the legs going straight down because you want them to support weight. You're making a practical item, so think about what you're making it for. For the sake of this stool, we want the legs splayed out slightly, mostly for decorative purposes. So we'll mark up. They need to be drilled perfectly. I said they need to be drilled at 10 degrees. My drill press has helpfully got degrees on it, so I can turn it to 10, and I've got the table marked there from 0, so I know when it's at 10 degrees. A good way to check your measurement without checking your measurement is to actually use one of these old templates that you keep. And if when you line one up, you know, there we go. Well, that's the wrong one. But basically, if it lines up, it's going to be correct. So that's the angle, and you could follow that through. But anyway, it's 10 degrees. You can change it depending how you need. What's important though is to mark this properly, because these need to be at equal distances. One thing that I like to note is which way the grain runs, because I'm going to decorate it, so I'm going to be looking at the picture on the top. This is an example of getting it wrong. I would much rather the grain ran side to side, not diagonally on my picture. Maybe horizontally, but not diagonally. So that is an example on purpose. That's an example of the grain running. I don't think anybody else would notice, to be honest. But as with a lot of things, if you're making something, you do notice and you want to get it right. So we want the grain to run that way, which means we want the stool legs to be there, 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 and there, not there, 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 and there. So when we flip it over, we need to draw across, and we need to draw it diagonally to the grain. Actually, this one's not a great example of grain. It is. It's got 2 lines. It's usually easiest to draw across with the grain to start with, because you've got the grain to naturally help you line it up. And then you can draw your diagonals through that. And it should be right. Now you follow those all the way to the outside. It's not quite right. There we go. Now these are called your sight lines. You could certainly use the indexer. It probably would be simpler. You could also use a template. And actually, something that I didn't mention earlier, because I went too fast and forgot what I wanted to say, was that an ideal way to hold your stool top in the first place would not be to use a chuck at all. It would be to use a blank piece of wood like this, and then screw, well, thinner obviously and cheaper, but then screw your blank onto the piece of wood, marking 4 points where your stool legs are going to be and screwing it to your faceplate using those points. Because then when it comes to the end, you'll be able to get rid of it. Your screw holes will be gone. So whereas I would very, very rarely use a faceplate these days, this is one of the few opportunities where a faceplate is actually a good system to use. But yeah, to get your to get them at perfect measurements, the indexing system would definitely be the best thing to use. I do a lot just by eye, and I think a stool, even if they're not perfect, they will look pretty much there. But yeah, definitely worth thinking about. I must say, I hadn't thought about it myself until it came to this project, but holding it on a faceplate is definitely the way to go, and I will probably make myself a blank seat with some holes that I can use over and over and over to screw stool seats to. But we've got to that stage, we've got it marked. We now just need to decide how far in we want that to go. Time is 9:15. That's fine. So to mark it, I'm not sure where to hold. I'm not used to being on camera. You don't want to be too near the edge, but at the same time, you've got a bit of bulk behind there, so it doesn't matter too much. About there, about maybe 5 mils will do. I actually mark it with that, because then I can use the same method each way. Just do it by sight, it's fine. So there we go. So you work your way around, mark those points, ready to drill. They do need to be the same distance in each side, which they are. I will assume they are. Now, I'm going to use this pillar drill. Let's say pillar drill is a really useful thing to have in your workshop. If you're just setting up a workshop, pillar drill is probably quite high on the list, maybe second after a bandsaw. Well, a lathe, obviously, but you've got that, because otherwise, why would you want a workshop? So all we're going to do is line it up on here. I think that's probably, I don't know if that's the best angle. Let's see. Now, ideally, I want to line this up and get it onto the wood before I push go on here. But at the same time, we need to check that we're going to get this right. So these lines, that's the reason I've drawn them all the way through, is that's your sight line. I want to make sure that that runs straight down the middle of the rest, and I want to make sure that one perpendicular to it. That's ideal. You can use a grip if you want to keep it steady. But from experience, I don't think it's going to move far, as long as I don't push it too. Move a little bit. So there we go. Hold it tight and drill in. As you drill in, make sure to keep this very, very still, because you're going to have to go up and down a little bit for it to cut, unless you've got sharper teeth than my drill bit. But I'm not keeping it very still. I should have used the grip. The reason you need to keep it very still, obviously, is if you move it around too much, the hole is going to be wider than it needs to be. And if the hole's too wide, the legs are going to be loose. And if the legs are going to be loose, you're going to fall off your stool. Now, to get the correct depth, I'm basically going to just go to the top of the drill bit I'm watching the drill bit at the back, and when the top of the drill bit gets to the surface of the wood, I'm going to stop. And I'm going to use that as my measurement. I don't know what that measurement is, but I know I can repeat it by using the same technique each time. And like I mentioned with the chisel before, about the waste wood on the bottom of the spindle, if you can use a chisel or a drill or something like that to gauge depth and measurement, then use that every time. That's not quite deep enough, which is a nuisance, but I'll just do a little bit more. Now, when I was doing some drilling earlier, I realized that this is a very slow, awkward, and quite boring process, which was the point when I realized I needed to make a blue Peter seat. Now, here's one I made earlier seat, because I thought talking over a lathe is one thing, but talking over a drill press is something altogether different, and that's no fun to do at all. But you can see what's happening. I'm drilling in, I'm getting the hole, and I'm getting an angle that's exactly the same as the stool I made earlier, which is 10 degrees. You'll get that angle each way as long as this is solid. You know, check that your platform is tight, because you know it comes loose quite easily, and say it's very easy to end up slipping. But yeah, that's the point where I thought we do not want to watch me drill 4 of those and struggle with it. So we're going to move on, and we're going to say that's it done. All 4 with the legs splaying out. It is worth pointing out at this stage that if you're going to make a rectangular stool, you need to be even more careful about the angles, because you have the angle coming this way and this way. You want all of these in the corners to be angled out. And you need to be really, really careful when you're drilling on a platform with a rectangle stool that you actually get the legs splayed outwards and not inwards, because it's quite easy to drill one hole the wrong way. So once that's done, we're going to pop the legs in, but before we pop the legs in, need to remove the spigot somehow. There's a few ways to do this. If you're lucky enough to own a vacuum chuck, now's the perfect time to use it, because you'll be able to hold this on a vacuum chuck and remove the spigot with your bowl gouge nice and easily and sand it up. I don't have a vacuum chuck myself, so that's not a technique that I use very often. With a bowl, I'd use a jam chuck, maybe coal jars. Not so easy to use. Now you can still use a jam chuck, a glue chuck, some method like that. But as I mentioned earlier, this is an exercise in getting things done. And at home, I don't always want to be messing around with chucks and jigs and holding systems. I just want rid of that quickly. So I've got a belt sander. I use a belt sander an awful lot. You can stick your belt sander on, put it on top, and lose quite a lot of the bulk of that without doing any damage. When you've only got a little bit left, I have a sander. This is called a mouse sander. I've had it for years. Suddenly discovered it's really useful in the workshop. It's noisy, but that will actually make pretty short work of a couple of millimetre spigot that's left on the bottom of something. So I know it's cheating, but it's getting things done. And if you haven't got them, you know, the machinery, the vacuum chuck, and if you're a beginner, and you don't want, you just want to finish your stool, then why not sand it off? Okay. There's lots of arguments for that, I know there is, but I would sand it off. Then you put your legs in. And we're getting near a finish, I think, now. So I just want to talk a little bit about the pyrography. But at this stage, you're going to put your legs in and you're going to make sure that they're the same length, which I highly doubt, because I don't think I have made one stool yet where all the legs at this point are correct. That's the leg I made earlier, which has still got a little notch of wood on it. Now, at this stage, it's time to remove the notch of wood, but only at this stage, because this is the stage where I know they're all going to fit in to the seat. So I don't need to make any more adjustments. I've sanded them. The legs are done. So at this point, you can take the notches off. Simple bandsaw, take them off like that. You could part them off on the lathe if you want. You could have parted them off on the lathe one at a time as you made them, but you wouldn't have been able to go back and make alterations if you needed to. I'm not saying you would need to. You might get it perfect first time. So, stool like that. Thankfully, they're pretty good fit, so I can actually spin it round without glue. There we go, that's an even better fit. So over it goes like this. Now once again, I know I've cheated, but I did make it all today, earlier. That's your stool. It should be looking something like, you see straight away, we've got a little bit of a wobble, so at least one of the legs is too long. This is the stage where you've got a few ways to fix one leg being too long. Number one way, drill a little bit deeper. Then you don't have to mess around at all with the legs. As long as you know which one it is, drill a little bit deeper. But before you drill a little bit deeper, you maybe want to just check that your beads are level. If your beads are all nice and level already, you don't want to mess that up by drilling a little bit deeper. If they're not, pick the one that's wrong. Drill that one a little bit deeper and put them right. You've solved two problems in one go. The other way to do it is probably a little bit more simple. We're going to look at this stool here and say, still got a little bit of a wobble, not much of a wobble, but a little bit. It looks like, sorry, it's those two legs, because the other two legs are wobbling. So, flip it upside down. There we go, problem solved. Looks a bit quick, a bit ruthless, but it's a stool. And say in the past, these were made a lot rougher than I've done. I would obviously go back to the bottom and give them a nice sand up. I don't want scratch marks, I do want them sanded. Like I said before, my thinking is that these are going to stand on a carpet. So I don't need the surface to be flat against the floor. A little bit of a curve doesn't matter to me too much. If I wanted to stand on it, absolutely, definitely flat like that. So it stands completely flat on the floor and it'll take the weight, nice and sturdy, same as a stool. I think
on that one, you put your base of your legs at 10 degrees then, have you?
yeah, at this one, yeah, but that would be done, well, I would do it at the last moment. I would be doing it now and I'd probably end up, using a belt sander or something like that to get the final degree perfect. But yeah, this is the point where, well, on a stool like this, you'd have some tidying up to do. You'd be chopping the bottom, you'd be chopping the top, putting some wedges in. But for something like this, personally, if I wanted to flatten these off, I'd still just go with that, or I'd use a belt sander and sand them flat, because you can make pretty short work of it. You're only sanding a part of a part of the curve rather than the whole thing. So anyway, like I say, for my sake, I'm quite happy with a little bit of a curve on the bottom. There are some problems with feet like this, although that would be the most obvious and the most stable. It can tear your carpets, it can dig into your lino, it can mark your woodwork. So it's not perfect, you know, and you certainly don't want to put a plastic stopper on the end of a nice turned wooden stool. I make a lot of trophies and quite often get asked, could I put some felt on the bottom of them? But the bottom's finished, the bottom's smooth, it doesn't need any felt. So felt, I think, was used to hide a lot of sins.
So would you have to put, see that stool that comes straight through the top?
Yeah.
Would you have to do that, could you do that like that without it coming out?
Yes, absolutely. Any type of stool. Yeah, any type of stool you could. This is, I think, really, this is a more traditional technique. You do have a bit of work to do at the end. You need to cut into the top of your leg. You need to make some little triangular wedges and knock them into the wood. You're also using the curve of the wood to wedge up against the stool, so it's a little bit harder to get the stool legs at the right height. It's more important to be aware of your curve on that kind of thing, which is another reason why I quite like not to go through all the time. But yeah, just taste. It really is. It's up to you. I say the main reason that I don't take the legs all the way through is purely because I want to decorate the top. I think everything I've read about making stools in the past, everything I've seen, was done that way. So I'm getting ready to finish because we are about 9:30. But I would just quickly like to mention the pyrography. I plan to colour the stool, decorate it. So I pyrograph an image on and then colour it afterwards. So to pyrograph that image, the main thing everybody wants to know is how do you get the image onto the wood? For this, it's a very, very simple technique. I've printed off just a picture from the computer. The outline isn't very dark, so I've drawn over the outline myself, just with a felt tip pen or a fine tipped pen. With an image like this, it doesn't really matter which way around the image is, but some images, it does matter. So you have to consider whether you want the mirrored image or not. That is the correct way around. So in actual fact, I have flipped the image and drawn the pens on that side to transfer it. Like I said, it doesn't really matter with a cartoon. The alternative way to do it is to put your piece of paper against a window or a computer screen or something and trace through like that. And then that's the back of the image. When you put that against the wood, you can transfer it from that side. I'm probably not making sense. The way I transfer an image onto the wood is after I've drawn around the outline in a black pen. You then dampen the wood with a cloth. Once the wood's damp, you can put your piece of paper on and just rub with a pencil, and the black pen will transfer onto the wood. If your cartoon picture has a nice black outline printed out, fresh from the printer, that'll transfer quite well anyway. This image didn't have a very good outline, so I drew the outline on myself. But basically, you draw the outline, put it on there, and you rub over. As you can see with this, when I'm talking about the mirror image, if you draw on that side and flip it, it's going to be backwards. So if you want your picture to face that way, and you don't have the option of being able to flip it on a computer, put it against a window, trace it through. Alternatively, use a piece of tracing paper, trace over something, as long as you use a pen, That will then transfer very well onto the wood. And then you don't need to be an artist. You just need a pyrography machine, which I did bring, but I'm not going to switch on and use at this stage in the game. But basically, your pyrography machine, if you pyrograph the outline, a lot of the work I do is all pyrograph. This is one of the few things where I might add a little bit of colour because it's a cartoon. Chose Pinocchio because it's every woodturner's friend, of course. Pyrograph the outline, and that allows you to colour the inside without the colour bleeding. I'm using inks to colour this. You could also use a wood stain. If you use acrylic, that would go straight on top of the wood, no problem. But if you want to use something like pen or stain, it's going to bleed into different parts. It'll bleed through the wood. But the pyrograph line stops the ink running. So if you pyrograph a nice, deep, bold line in, you can then colour it in and not worry too much about the blue bleeding into the yellow and vice versa.
You say inks, you use pen.
Inks, I use these. After much trial and error, you can use an ink stain. You can use, there's something called Inktense pencils that are quite nice. Pencil crayons that you use with a little bit of water. But after much trial and error, I've come to using these. Basically the felt tips, but with very, very fine points. You can get into something like a cartoon really well with them. And the reason for using inks is that you can then finish up quite well without smudging it everywhere. If you were to use something like a crayon, it would pretty much smudge when you put oil on or polish or whatever. With pens, let them dry. Oil's going to be difficult, but you can polish over them. There is a perfect way to finish something that's been coloured with ink, and that would be to use an acrylic spray. The last time I did it and got what I would consider a perfect result, I would get to this stage, I cut out the outline of Pinocchio, say, so you have just an empty silhouette. You can then put the silhouette over there to cover the wood completely, just leaving your ink drawing displayed, and spray it with the acrylic spray that a lot of woodturners use. A few layers of that will seal the ink absolutely perfectly, nice glossy finish. Take it off and you'll have a really glossy, lovely cartoon image on top of your wood.
Do that, have you oiled it at all, or would you not oil it?
I would oil it after doing that. Yeah, once I've done the acrylic, I've basically got a nice covered painted acrylic badge on there, and then I can put the oil in and it's not going to cause any problem. It's not going to make anything run. I think I can oil it before, but I'm not 100% sure if you can oil it without putting some kind of finish on. It's complicated, it's trial and error. And to be honest, it's a matter of preference. A lot of people might want to use paints at this stage. You don't even need to use transfers. You can go freehand. It's your choice of how to decorate. Like I say, quite often, I just pyrograph. But I think that's pretty much a wrap. That's what I do. I think that's a task that, like I say, anyone can have a go at. There's a lot of things that are good practice, but nothing that is too challenging, really. It's actually just a good thing to practice over and over and over. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else much to say, except it has been a pleasure being on the other side of things. I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone, so I appreciate everybody paying attention, basically, and not heckling me and asking too many awkward questions. Other than that, I am a club member. I am thinking of doing a little bit of training. Now I have a workshop that is of a suitable size and safety to do training. So you can contact me in the future for training sessions. I'm thinking sort of a few hours in an afternoon running through a project like this, or something maybe a little bit easier. But I'm not there yet. I'm looking forward to that in the summertime, and contact details, etc., can be found through the website, through the Ryedale Woodturners, and through the emails. But for me, that's the lot. Thank you very much. Cheers, thank you. And just over to John for a moment to wrap the night up for us. Thanks, John.
Can I leave with Andre? Why is it that once upon a time there were hundreds of thousands of one-legged stools in the UK?
Because of people like me who've got a one-legged stool.
Very genuinely, they all have the harness as well. The old people used to use for milking on. A single leg.
A single
Oh, yeah,
leg.
used to slide down, didn't they? Angled. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
There were hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
Every farm with a cow had one.
Which is fascinating. And I genuinely find stuff like that fascinating. I find learning about the stools, the Windsor style, etc. fascinating.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that we all come to these meetings and very few of us go away without learning something. Just how long you've been turning, you come and you learn something. Take that home with you. I would remind you once more, please turn up and do some work on the pavement at the sales weekend. We really need people. Dan, it's nice to have you here on your first demonstration.
Cheers, thank you. It is my first. Yeah.
I'm sure you'll get bookings for elsewhere as well. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Have a safe journey home and we'll find a round of applause, please.
Good.